Let me start with a hard truth. Most startups don't fail because the founders aren't smart enough. They don't fail because the market is too competitive. They don't even fail because the idea was terrible. They fail because they built something nobody truly needed, and they built it perfectly. Perfect code, perfect branding, perfect pitch deck, perfect plan built flawlessly on untested assumptions. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Entrepreneurship is not about executing a plan. It's about discovering what works before you run out of time and money. Hooray. A startup is not a smaller version of a big company. It is a temporary organization designed to search for a sustainable business model, and search requires experimentation. Yet most founders behave like architects, not scientists. They fall in love with vision instead of evidence. They scale before validating. They hire before understanding retention. They pour money into marketing before confirming value. That's not strategy, that's hope. And hope is expensive. The most successful entrepreneurs in today's world don't build faster, they learn faster. They understand that every idea is a hypothesis. Every feature is an experiment. Every customer interaction is data, and every dollar spent must reduce uncertainty. They don't ask, how do we make this perfect? They ask, what is the riskiest assumption, and how do we test it immediately? This is the mindset shift that changes everything. Instead of spending 18 months building a masterpiece, they launch something embarrassingly simple in 3 weeks. Instead of measuring likes and downloads, they measure retention and behavior. Instead of defending their idea, they refine it. Because here's the truth, vision without validation is hallucination. The path to radically successful businesses is not built on avoiding failure. It's built on failing cheaply, learning rapidly, and iterating relentlessly. Build, measure, learn over. And when you finally feel customers pulling instead of you pushing, when retention stabilizes, referrals grow organically, and revenue becomes predictable, that's not luck. That's product market fit earned through disciplined experimentation. But even then, the journey isn't over. Because scaling without learning kills companies just as surely as ignorance. The winners institutionalize experimentation. They reward truth over ego. They protect cash like oxygen. They scale what works, stop what doesn't, and question what they don't understand. And here's where this becomes bigger than startups. Lean thinking isn't just a business strategy, it's a life strategy. You test before you commit. You validate before you invest. You iterate before you scale. You preserve optionality. You reduce downside while protecting upside. That's how wealth is built. Not through one bold leap, but through disciplined, validated progress. So if you remember one thing tonight, remember this. You don't build a successful company by being right from the start. You build it by becoming less wrong, faster than everyone else. And in a world defined by uncertainty, the entrepreneur who learns fastest wins. Let me begin with a confession. When I first started building startups, I thought entrepreneurship was about vision. Big vision, bold ideas, disruption, strategy decks, perfect plans. I believed that if I was smart enough, if I worked hard enough, if I crafted the right product with enough precision, success would follow. And then I watched company after company fail. Not because the founders were lazy, not because they lacked passion, not even because the ideas were bad. They failed because they were building in the dark. They were executing perfectly on assumptions. And assumptions, when left untested, are the most expensive assets a company can hold. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most startups don't fail from poor execution. They fail from building something nobody actually needs. You can have flawless code, stunning design, and aggressive marketing budget, and still be marching confidently toward irrelevance. Because entrepreneurship is not about building products. It is about discovering what customers truly value. And discovery is a process. Let me tell you a story. Imagine 2 founders. The first spends 18 months building what he believes is the perfect platform. He raises capital, hires engineers, builds feature after feature, polishes every pixel. When he finally launches, he expects applause. Instead, there is silence. The second founder builds something embarrassingly simple in 3 weeks. A crude prototype, barely functional. She shows it to customers immediately. They criticize it. They misunderstand it. They ignore parts of it. But she listens. She measures behavior, not compliments. She adapts. 3 months later, her product looks nothing like the original idea, but customers are paying. Who is the better entrepreneur? The second one understands a fundamental principle. A startup is not a smaller version of a big company. It is a temporary organization designed to search for a sustainable business model, and search requires experimentation. This is where most people misunderstand innovation. They think innovation is about genius. It is not. It is about validated learning, learning what works, learning what doesn't, learning what customers will exchange value for. And here is a principle I want you to write down: a build not to impress. Build to learn. When you adopt this mindset, everything changes. Perfection becomes waste. Speed becomes advantage. Failure becomes information. Now let's talk about financial freedom, because entrepreneurship is often romanticized as a fast path to wealth. But wealth is not created by ambition alone. It is created by systems that produce predictable value. And predictability comes from evidence, not enthusiasm. Too many founders burn capital chasing ego-driven milestones, press coverage, vanity metrics, social media buzz. But buzz does not equal business. Revenue does not equal sustainability. Growth does not equal profitability. Financial freedom requires discipline. Discipline to measure what matters. Discipline to pivot when evidence demands it. Discipline to kill ideas you love. Here is another principle. Revenue is vanity. Profit is sanity. Cash flow is freedom. If you want to build wealth through entrepreneurship, you must think beyond product. You must understand unit economics. Customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, retention curves. You are not building a product. You are building an engine. And that engine has three core components: build, measure, learn. This loop is the heartbeat of modern entrepreneurship. You build a minimal version of your idea, not the final masterpiece. You measure real customer behavior, not opinions. You learn whether your hypothesis was correct. Then you repeat. The faster this loop turns, the faster your company evolves. Speed of learning is the ultimate competitive advantage. Large companies move slowly because their systems are optimized for execution. Startups must be optimized for learning. Now, let me challenge something you may believe. You might think success comes from avoiding failure. But in startups, avoiding failure often means avoiding learning. The key is not to avoid failure, it is to fail cheaply. Small experiments, controlled risk, measured iteration. This is not recklessness, it is intelligent risk management. And intelligent risk management is a cornerstone of financial freedom. Investors diversify portfolios to limit catastrophic loss. Entrepreneurs diversify experiments to limit existential risk. Every MVP is a hedge against illusion. Every test is insurance against waste. Let me share a quote that captures this mindset. A vision without validation is hallucination. Entrepreneurs fall in love with vision, but customers fall in love with solutions. If those two don't align, the market will not reward you, and the market is the final judge. Now think about your own ambitions. Maybe you want to launch a business. Maybe you want to create a digital product. Maybe you want to escape the 9-to-5 and build financial independence. Ask yourself, have you validated the problem? Or are you polishing a solution in search of one? Financial freedom is not built on guesswork. It is built on tested demand. Too many aspiring entrepreneurs delay action because they want certainty, but certainty is a luxury reserved for mature businesses. Startups operate in uncertainty by design. The goal is not to eliminate uncertainty. It is to reduce it systematically. You do that by shrinking the time between idea and feedback. You do that by releasing before you are comfortable. You do that by measuring real behavior instead of relying on surveys. Here is something counterintuitive. The smaller your first version, the greater your long-term freedom. Because small releases create rapid insight. Rapid insight prevents massive waste. Massive waste destroys runway. Runway is time. Time is optionality. Optionality is survival. And survival is the first job of every startup. Now let's address something deeper. Entrepreneurship is not only a business strategy, it is a mindset. It is the willingness to test your beliefs against reality. It is the humility to admit when you are wrong. It is the discipline to iterate instead of defend. And this mindset applies beyond startups. It applies to investing. It applies to career development. It applies to personal growth. Instead of committing years to a path without feedback, design experiments. Want to move industries? Test through consulting or side projects. Want to build a new income stream? Launch a small pilot. want to invest in a new asset class. Oh, start small and measure. Continuous innovation is not chaos, it is structured curiosity, and structured curiosity compounds. Over time, small validated improvements create massive outcomes. Large untested leaps create dramatic collapses. So if you remember nothing else from tonight, remember this: entrepreneurship is not about being right. It is about becoming less wrong over time, and those who become less wrong faster win. In the next part, we will explore the build, measure, learn loop in depth and how mastering this cycle not only creates successful companies but creates predictable paths to financial independence. Let's go deeper into the engine. If part one was about awakening to the reality that startups fail because they build without learning, then part two is about mastering the most powerful mechanism ever designed for navigating uncertainty: the build, measure, learn loop. This is not a slogan, it is a discipline. And when understood correctly, it becomes a framework not only for business success, but for financial freedom and personal leverage. Let's break something down. Most people think the order of success is think right arrow, plan right arrow, build right arrow, launch right arrow, hope. But hope is not a strategy. And planning without data is speculation. The lean approach reverses the emphasis. You begin with a hypothesis. Every startup idea is a set of hypotheses pretending to be a strategy. You believe customers have a problem. You believe they care enough to solve it. You believe your solution solves it. You believe they will pay. You believe you can acquire them profitably. You believe they will stay. Those are assumptions, and assumptions are liabilities until proven. So instead of asking, how do I build the perfect product? Ask, what is the riskiest assumption in my model? Because the riskiest assumption is the one that can destroy you fastest. This is where build, measure, learn begins. You build the smallest possible experiment that tests the riskiest assumption, not the full product. Not the polished brand, the minimum viable product. And let's clarify something. Viable does not mean minimal effort. It means minimal scope required to learn. The goal of an MVP is not to impress, it is to test. Let me give you a scenario. Suppose you want to launch an online education platform. The traditional route would be spend months creating curriculum, film high production videos, build a website, launch marketing campaigns. That's a massive investment based on belief. The lean route asks, what is the core assumption? Perhaps it's this: people are willing to pay for this knowledge. So instead of building everything, you run a live workshop on Zoom. You charge for it, you observe. Do people pay? Do they show up? Do they complete it? Do they recommend it? In 1 week, you have more validated learning than 6 months of isolated building. Here is a principle to internalize. Learning per dollar spent is the metric that matters in early stages. This applies directly to financial freedom. Many people burn capital chasing scale before proving demand. They invest heavily in inventory before testing market appetite. They take on debt before validating pricing power. They hire before confirming retention. That is not boldness. That is fragile ambition. Lean entrepreneurship is not about being small, it is about being precise. Now let's talk about measurement. Not all metrics are equal. Vanity metrics feel good. Website visits, app downloads, social media followers, but they do not guarantee sustainability. Actionable metrics tell you whether your business model works. Conversion rates, retention rates, customer lifetime value, churn, unit economics. If customers try your product once and never return, that is data. If customers refer others organically, that is data. If acquisition cost exceeds lifetime value, that is data. And data is neutral. Your ego may react, but data is simply information. This is where entrepreneurs must cultivate emotional discipline, because data often contradicts belief, and belief is deeply personal. When data challenges your idea, it can feel like a challenge to your identity. But remember, you are not your product. You are the steward of learning. Detach identity from outcome. Attach identity to iteration. This shift alone increases your probability of financial success dramatically, because founders who defend ideas go broke. Founders who refine ideas build wealth. Now let's discuss the final part of the loop, learning. The learning is not automatic. You must interpret results honestly. Did customers truly value the product, or were they just being polite? Did they use it consistently, or did novelty inflate engagement? Did they pay full price or only respond to discounts? Learning requires intellectual honesty. And intellectual honesty is rare, but it is the cornerstone of sustainable entrepreneurship. If build, measure, learn is the engine, then innovation accounting is the dashboard. In early-stage companies, traditional accounting metrics do not tell the full story. Revenue may be low initially. Profit may not exist, but progress can still be measured. Are experiments reducing uncertainty? Are retention metrics improving? Is conversion rising? Are customer behaviors aligning with your hypothesis? Innovation accounting allows you to measure learning velocity, and velocity determines survival. Here is something crucial for those pursuing financial independence through entrepreneurship. Speed of iteration reduces cost of failure. The faster you test, the cheaper your mistakes. The cheaper your mistakes, the longer your runway. The longer your runway, the greater your chance of breakthrough. Breakthroughs rarely happen from the first idea. They emerge from disciplined pivots. Now let's talk about pivoting. Pivoting is not quitting. It is structured course correction. A pivot happens when data shows your hypothesis is flawed, but the underlying opportunity still exists. You might pivot your customer segment, your pricing model, your distribution channel, your feature set. Each pivot is informed by evidence. This is not random experimentation. It is guided adaptation. Financially, this mindset protects capital. Instead of doubling down blindly, you reallocate resources intelligently. And resource allocation is the essence of wealth building. Think like an investor. Would you continue funding an asset that consistently underperforms without adjusting strategy? Of course not. Yet many founders emotionally subsidize failing models. Lean thinking eliminates emotional subsidy. It demands accountability. Now I want to address a misconception. Lean does not mean cheap. It does not mean small thinking. It does not mean avoiding ambition. It means reducing waste. And waste is anything that does not contribute to validated learning. Long meetings without experiments, features without data, marketing without conversion analysis, hiring without role clarity. All of it consumes capital. Capital equals optionality equals power. The more waste you eliminate, the more freedom you create. And financial freedom is, at its core, optionality, the ability to choose. Choose projects, choose markets, choose time allocation, choose risk exposure. Lean entrepreneurship builds optionality through disciplined experimentation. It transforms chaos into structured discovery, and structured discovery compounds. If you improve conversion by 2% each cycle, if you reduce churn slightly each month, if you refine acquisition channels incrementally, small gains stack. And stacked gains produce exponential outcomes. This is how radically successful businesses are created, not through single moments of brilliance, but through relentless iteration. Here is a quote to anchor this. Success is not built on a perfect launch. It is built on perfecting the loop. In the next part, we will explore the concept of product market fit, sustainable growth engines, and how to scale intelligently without destroying the very learning culture that created your success. Now we arrive at the moment every startup is chasing, but few truly understand. Product market fit. It's a phrase that gets thrown around casually, almost mythically. Founders say, once we hit product market fit, everything will explode. Investors ask, do you have it yet? Teams whisper it like it's a milestone you unlock once and keep forever. But product market fit is not a trophy. It's a signal, and it's a fragile one. Let me tell you what it feels like before you find it. You are pushing, you are convincing, you are explaining your product repeatedly. Customers show interest but not urgency. Sales cycles drag. Engagement fluctuates. Marketing feels like lifting a heavy object uphill. You can make progress, but it requires force. Then something shifts. Customers start pulling. They use the product without reminders. They refer others organically. Retention stabilizes. Revenue grows with less persuasion. Your job shifts from convincing people to managing demand. That shift from push to pull is the real sign of product market fit. Here's the principle. Before product market fit, focus on learning. After product market fit, focus on scaling. Most entrepreneurs reverse this. They try to scale learning. They pour money into marketing before confirming retention. They chase growth before confirming value. And scaling something that doesn't truly work is the fastest way to magnify waste. Now let's talk about what product market fit actually requires. It requires alignment between three forces: a real problem, a clear customer segment, a solution that creates measurable value. Notice what's missing: features. Features are distractions until the core problem is solved deeply. Let me give you an example. Imagine you build a productivity app. You launch with 50 features: calendar integrations, AI suggestions, collaboration tools, dashboards. Users sign up, but after 2 weeks they stop using it. Why? Because maybe their real pain wasn't lack of tools. It was lack of accountability. So you pivot, you strip the product down to one simple feature: daily check-ins with a peer. Usage spikes, retention improves. The lesson? More complexity does not equal more value. Depth of solution matters more than breadth of functionality. Here's a quote to remember: "A depth beats width in the search for product market fit." Now, once you begin to see pull from the market, you must ask a critical question: what is driving growth? In lean thinking, growth is not accidental. It is powered by engines. There are three fundamental growth engines every entrepreneur must understand: the sticky engine, the viral engine, the paid engine. Let's explore them. The sticky engine relies on retention. Customers stay. They renew. They keep using the product. If churn is low, growth compounds. This engine requires deep value creation. It's about making your product indispensable. Financially, this is powerful. Recurring revenue creates predictability. Predictability creates stability. Stability creates investable cash flow. And investable cash flow builds wealth. Now the viral engine. This engine grows when customers bring in other customers, referrals, invitations, network effects. But virality cannot be forced. It must be designed into the experience. If sharing increases the value of the product, growth becomes exponential. However, virality without retention is illusion. You can go viral and still die if users leave quickly. Now the paid engine. This engine works when you can reliably acquire customers at a cost lower than their lifetime value. If you spend $50 to acquire a customer who generates $200 in profit over time, you can scale predictably. But if acquisition cost exceeds lifetime value, scaling accelerates failure. This is why unit economics matter more than excitement. Financial freedom is built on sustainable margins, not momentary hype. Now here is where many founders make a fatal mistake. They find early traction and assume they have product market fit, but early traction can be misleading. Friends sign up. Curious early adopters experiment. Press coverage drives temporary spikes. The real test is sustained behavior over time. Retention curves flattening. Customers complaining when the service is unavailable. Organic referrals without incentives. That's when you know value is real. And once value is real, scaling becomes responsible. Let's connect this to wealth creation. Entrepreneurship is one of the most powerful paths to financial independence. But it is also one of the riskiest. The difference between ruin and wealth often lies in timing. Scaling before fit burns capital. Scaling after fit multiplies capital. Capital efficiency is the silent multiplier of wealth. The less waste in your growth engine, the more profit flows to owner. And ownership is where real wealth is created. Salary caps income. Equity multiplies upside, but equity only has value if the business model works. So obsess over fit, obsess over retention, obsess over value delivered. Not press mentions, not vanity growth, not office space. Here's another principle: grow only what you can measure. If you don't know why customers stay, growth is fragile. If you don't know why they leave, scaling magnifies churn. Lean entrepreneurs treat growth as an experiment, not an assumption. They test pricing, they test messaging. They test channels. Each experiment refines the engine, and refinement compounds. Now let's address something uncomfortable. Sometimes you will test relentlessly and still not find fit. This is where emotional maturity becomes critical. Founders fall in love with solutions, but markets only reward relevance. If evidence repeatedly shows weak retention, you must face reality. Pivot or perish. This is not failure. It is disciplined adaptation. And disciplined adaptation protects capital. Protecting capital protects optionality. Optionality preserves your entrepreneurial journey. Remember, attachment kills startups. Curiosity saves them. When you detach ego from product, you unlock flexibility. Flexibility leads to discovery. Discovery leads to fit, leads to growth. Growth leads to wealth. But only if you scale intelligently. In the next part, we will explore how to scale without destroying innovation, how to build systems, culture, and leadership structures that preserve continuous experimentation even as your company grows. Now we confront the paradox that destroys many promising companies. They finally achieve product market fit. Customers are pulling, revenue is growing, momentum is real. And that's exactly when they begin to die, not because demand disappears, but because growth suffocates learning. Let me explain. In the early days of a startup, survival depends on experimentation. You test everything. You question assumptions. You pivot quickly. You measure obsessively. But once revenue starts climbing, a subtle shift occurs. Efficiency replaces curiosity. Process replaces exploration. Management replaces experimentation. And slowly, the company begins optimizing yesterday's success instead of discovering tomorrow's opportunity. This is the innovation paradox. The very systems that help you scale can strangle the experimentation that made you successful. So how do you grow without losing your edge? You must build a culture of continuous innovation, not accidental innovation, not innovation weak, continuous innovation, and that requires intentional leadership. Let's start with something fundamental. As companies grow, they naturally gravitate toward predictability. Predictability makes investors comfortable. Predictability makes forecasting easier. Predictability creates stability, but innovation is inherently unpredictable. So leaders must protect experimentation inside predictable systems. This is not chaos. It is structured autonomy. Here is a principle: execution builds today's revenue. Experimentation builds tomorrow's. You must fund both, and you must measure them differently. If you evaluate experimental projects using the same metrics as mature products, you will kill them prematurely. A new initiative cannot immediately produce the same margins as an established engine. Instead, you measure learning milestones. Are hypotheses being tested? Is uncertainty decreasing? Are early indicators improving? This is innovation accounting at scale. And this is critical for financial sustainability because growth without innovation leads to eventual decline. But innovation without discipline leads to chaos. The balance is leadership maturity. Now let's talk about teams. In early startups, founders make most decisions. Communication is informal. Learning is immediate. But as headcount increases, distance grows, and distance kills feedback loops. If frontline employees see customer behavior daily but leadership only sees dashboards, insight can be lost. So scalable learning systems must be intentional, rapid experimentation cycles, transparent metrics, empowered teams with decision authority. If teams must wait weeks for approval to test ideas, learning slows, and slow learning is expensive. Remember, a speed of learning is the only sustainable competitive advantage. Now let's connect this to financial freedom. Many entrepreneurs dream of building a company that runs without them. But if you centralize decision-making, you become the bottleneck. And bottlenecks cap scalability. Scalability caps wealth. True financial independence requires systems that generate value beyond your direct effort, and systems require distributed intelligence, empowered teams, clear metrics, autonomous experimentation. This is not about losing control. It is about designing intelligent control through data, control through alignment. Control through transparency, not control through micromanagement. Micromanagement slows learning, and slow learning increases risk. Now consider this. As companies scale, they often increase spending aggressively. Marketing budgets, headcount, infrastructure. But scaling costs money. If your growth engine is not deeply understood, scaling amplifies inefficiencies. For example, if you don't know exactly why customers retain, marketing expansion may attract low-quality users who churn quickly. Or if you don't know which acquisition channels produce profitable customers, increasing ad spend may destroy margins. Lean scaling requires disciplined expansion. Test scaling in controlled increments. Increase budget gradually. Measure unit economics continuously. Ensure lifetime value consistently exceeds acquisition cost. Here's a financial principle. Scale what works. Stop what doesn't. Question what you don't understand. Simple, but rarely practiced. Now let's discuss leadership psychology. Growth creates ego pressure. Success creates identity attachment. Founders may become attached to being the visionary. Executives may resist ideas that challenge existing models. But innovation demands humility. It demands saying, what worked before may not work now. Markets evolve. Technology shifts. Customer expectations change. If your identity is tied to past success, you may resist necessary adaptation. This is how dominant companies collapse. They optimize legacy systems instead of questioning them. Lean leadership requires intellectual flexibility. It requires rewarding truth over hierarchy. If data contradicts executive opinion, data wins. If frontline insight challenges strategy, it must be heard. This is difficult, but it is the price of longevity. Now let's zoom out. Entrepreneurship is not a one-time event. It is a continuous process of navigating uncertainty. Even mature companies must act like startups in pockets of their organization. Innovation teams, R&D experiments, new product initiatives. Without these, stagnation creeps in. And stagnation erodes value silently. For those pursuing wealth, understand this. The greatest financial outcomes come from companies that reinvent themselves. Amazon began with books. Netflix began with DVD. Technology giants constantly disrupt their own models. Self-disruption is uncomfortable. But waiting for competitors to disrupt you is fatal. In your own career or investment strategy, apply the same principle. Don't wait for industry shifts to force change. Experiment proactively. Test new skills. Explore new markets. Diversify intelligently. Continuous innovation is not only a company strategy, it is a life strategy. Now let's talk about risk. Many people equate innovation with recklessness, but lean thinking is the opposite of reckless. It is disciplined risk reduction. Every experiment reduces uncertainty. Every metric clarifies direction. Every pivot reallocates resources intelligently. Risk becomes calculated instead of emotional, and calculated risk builds wealth. Emotional risk destroys it. So here is a quote to carry forward: growth without learning is gambling. Growth with learning is strategy. In the next part, we will explore the deeper entrepreneurial mindset: resilience, emotional discipline, decision-making under uncertainty, and how founders build both companies and personal financial leverage simultaneously. Now we move into the internal game. Because tools, frameworks, loops, and metrics, they are powerful, but they are useless without the psychological resilience to apply them consistently. Entrepreneurship is not a strategy problem. It is an emotional endurance problem disguised as a strategy problem. Let me be blunt. You will doubt yourself. You will launch experiments that fail. You will build features customers ignore. You will hire people who don't work out. You will face months where growth stalls. And in those moments, the temptation is to react emotionally, to abandon the loop, to chase a shiny new idea, to blame the market, to panic scale. But lean thinking demands something rare: disciplined patience. Here is a truth most people don't say out loud. Startups fail less from bad ideas and more from emotional overreaction. Overreaction to slow growth, overreaction to criticism, overreaction to competition. Overreaction to temporary setbacks. The build, measure, learn loop only works if you allow it to complete. If you pivot before data is meaningful, you create chaos. If you cling to an idea despite evidence, you create stagnation. The art is knowing when learning is sufficient to act, and that requires emotional control. Let me give you a quote to anchor this. Entrepreneurship is a practice of controlled impatience. You are impatient for impact, but patient with process, impatient to test, patient for results, impatient to learn, patient with iteration. Now let's talk about decision-making under uncertainty. In traditional management, decisions are made based on forecasts. In startups, forecasts are fiction. So how do you decide? You make reversible decisions quickly and irreversible decisions slowly. This distinction is critical. If a choice can be undone cheaply, act fast. If a choice carries irreversible consequences, large capital investment, equity dilution, long-term contracts, demand stronger evidence. Financial freedom depends on this principle. Quick experiments, slow commitments. Test ideas cheaply before investing heavily. Pilot before scaling. Validate before borrowing. Confirm retention before expanding infrastructure. Many entrepreneurs lose financial independence because they scale irreversible commitments too early. They sign expensive leases, hire aggressively. Raise capital without product market fit. Capital creates pressure. Pressure creates desperation. Desperation distorts decision-making. Lean thinking protects you from this trap because lean thinking says, earn the right to scale. You earn it through validated learning. You earn it through retention, through unit economics, through repeatable acquisition. Now let's shift inward again. One of the greatest threats to founders is ego. Success inflates it. Failure wounds it, but ego distorts feedback. When your identity is fused with your startup, data feels personal. If customers churn, you feel rejected. If growth slows, you feel inadequate. But your job is not to be validated. Your job is to learn. Detach identity from outcome. Attach identity to discipline. You are not your latest metric. You are the architect of your learning process. This is emotional maturity. And emotional maturity creates financial durability because volatility in business is inevitable. Markets shift. Algorithms change. Customer preferences evolve. If every fluctuation shakes your confidence, you will make reactive decisions. Reactive decisions destroy capital. Calm iteration preserves it. Now let's talk about wealth more directly. Many founders believe building a startup automatically equals wealth. That is not true. Wealth comes from ownership plus sustainable value creation. Ownership means equity. Sustainable value means durable cash flow. You can raise millions and still own nothing meaningful. You can generate revenue and still burn cash. Lean thinking increases the probability that your equity becomes valuable because it forces discipline early. It protects runway. It reduces waste. It prioritizes retention. Retention is underrated in wealth creation. Acquiring new customers is expensive. Keeping customers is profitable. The difference between fragile startups and durable companies often lies in churn rate. High churn means constant reinvestment in acquisition. Low churn means compounding revenue. Compounding revenue builds asset value. Asset value builds personal wealth. So if you want financial freedom, obsess over durability, not hype, not headlines, not valuation theater, durability. Here's another principle. Cash flow is oxygen. Ownership is leverage. Discipline is survival. If your company generates steady cash flow, you gain optionality. You can reinvest, you can diversify, you can build personal financial reserves. Too many founders live paper rich and cash poor. They chase valuation instead of sustainability. Valuation is speculative. Cash flow is real. Lean entrepreneurs build real engines. Now let's zoom out even further. Lean is not just about startups. It is about life design. You want to change careers? Run experiments. Freelance part-time. Test market demand. You want to build passive income? Launch small digital products. Validate audience response. Refine offers. You want to invest? Start small. Measure returns. Adjust allocation. Continuous innovation applies to your finances as much as your company. Instead of betting everything on one massive leap, build diversified experiments. Learning compounds. Compounded learning produces asymmetric outcomes. Over time, disciplined experimentation creates a portfolio of insights. Some fail, some break even, a few explode. Those few fund the rest. This is how radically successful entrepreneurs think, not in binary wins and losses, but in probabilities. Lean thinking transforms entrepreneurship from gambling into calculated iteration, and calculated iteration reduces downside while preserving upside. That asymmetry, limited downside, unlimited upside, is the foundation of wealth creation. Now, in our final part, we will integrate everything. The mindset, the systems, the scaling, the emotional discipline. We will tie it together into a blueprint for building not just startups, but a life of continuous innovation and financial independence. Now let's bring everything together, because Lean is not just a startup methodology. It is a philosophy of intelligent progress in an uncertain world. We began with a simple truth. Most startups fail not from lack of effort, but from building what nobody needs. We learned that assumptions are liabilities until validated. We explored the build, measure, learn loop as the engine of continuous innovation. We examined product market fit as the moment when customers begin to pull. We discussed scaling without suffocating experimentation. We confronted the emotional discipline required to survive volatility. Now the final question is this: how do you build a life, not just a company, around continuous innovation? Because the real power of lean thinking is not in launching products. It is in designing a system that makes progress inevitable. Let me share a core belief. The goal of entrepreneurship is not to avoid failure. It is to make failure survivable and learning inevitable. When you internalize this, fear changes shape. You no longer fear being wrong. You fear not testing. You no longer fear market feedback. You fear stagnation. And stagnation is the true enemy of both business and wealth. Let's talk about financial independence through the lean lens. Financial freedom is not built through one massive breakthrough. It is built through disciplined compounding of validated bets, small experiments, measured risk. Iterative refinement, scalable systems. If you apply, build, measure, learn to your financial life, you create asymmetric upside with limited downside. You test new income streams before quitting your job. D. You validate demand before investing heavily. You analyze unit economics before scaling ad spend. You confirm retention before expanding infrastructure. Each cycle reduces uncertainty. Each cycle strengthens your position. Each cycle increases optionality. And optionality is freedom. The ultimate freedom is the ability to choose your direction without being trapped by sunk costs or fragile assumptions. Now let's talk about long-term sustainability. The companies that dominate decades are not those that guessed right once. They are those that institutionalized learning. They made experimentation cultural. They rewarded truth over ego. They built dashboards that measured reality. They encouraged teams to question even successful models. If you want durable wealth, build a durable system. A durable system is one that adapts faster than the environment changes. Markets evolve, technology shifts, consumer behavior transforms. If your identity is tied to one product, you are fragile. If your skills are tied to one industry, you are fragile. If your wealth depends on one asset, you are fragile. Lean thinking encourages diversification through experimentation. You don't abandon focus. You build multiple learning loops within your company, within your career, within your investments. Over time, these loops compound knowledge, and knowledge compounds returns. Here is a quote to anchor this final idea. A continuous innovation is not about moving fast. It is about learning faster than the world changes. When you learn faster, you adapt sooner. When you adapt sooner, you capture opportunity earlier. When you capture opportunity earlier, you create leverage. Leverage is the multiplier of effort. Technology is leverage. Capital is leverage. Talent is leverage. Systems are leverage. Lean entrepreneurship builds leverage gradually. First, validate value. Then, refine economics. Then, scale distribution. Then, institutionalize learning. Each stage strengthens your foundation, but never confuse scaling with security. Security comes from adaptability. If your company generates cash but cannot evolve, its future is uncertain. If your wealth grows but is not diversified, it is vulnerable. If your mindset becomes rigid, your decisions will lag behind reality. So the final discipline is humility. Humility to question your own success. Humility to test assumptions repeatedly. Humility to listen to customers. Humility to revise strategy. Humility is not weakness. It is strategic intelligence. Because the market does not reward ego, it rewards value. And value must be discovered continuously. Let me leave you with a blueprint you can apply immediately. Start with a bold vision. Break it into risky assumptions. Design the smallest experiment to test the riskiest one. Measure real behavior. Learn honestly. Adjust quickly. Protect cash. Preserve runway. Repeat relentlessly. Do this long enough and something powerful happens. Your company becomes anti-fragile. Your skills become adaptable. Your finances become resilient. You stop fearing uncertainty because uncertainty becomes your competitive advantage. Most people freeze in uncertainty. Lean entrepreneurs move through it methodically. And that difference, that discipline, data-driven courage is what creates radically successful businesses. It is also what creates radically empowered lives. So don't chase perfection. Chase progress. Don't chase validation. Chase learning. Don't chase hype. Chase durability. And remember, you don't build a startup by being right from the start. You build it by becoming less wrong faster than everyone else. That is lean. That is continuous innovation. And that is how today's entrepreneurs create not only companies, but lasting financial freedom.